There's been a tremendous amount of scrutiny of my experience, and you know, I used to be, just outraged at being so questioned, but I had to realize that, this is pretty strong stuff, and a certain amount of, people taking a hard look at it is warranted, I agree with Carl Sagan when he says extraordinary claims deserve extraordinary evidence. So that's fine. It's when people draw conclusions about the subject in general, or about my case in particular, without having referenced the facts or all of the facts of the case, that I really take exception. I think it's anyone's duty, in examining any topic of any importance in today's world, to first get the facts, And everybody's free to blather and blab out their opinion as they want, and the internet has made that abundantly clear. People are out there saying whichever and whatever, but there's a certain social responsibility that we all have to know what we're talking about before we open our mouth. Well, the Hollywood experience was a real awakening. We all have a lot of preconceptions about how that would be. And to be honest, a lot of my preconceptions were negative, and so I turned down a lot of offers before Tracy Torme came along. And, he persuaded me that this would be an ideal opportunity to allow people to experience this thing as we did when it happened, and that might, create a greater openness to, taking a look at the facts, and so I agreed. And Tracy did fight hard to keep things as close to the facts as possible, but any Hollywood endeavor is really a pretty big committee, and the farther up the ladder the project goes, the more diverse the voices and opinions, and more influential they are into the outcome. So as time went on, there were departures that not everyone's been happy with, but in the end, I think it still remained as a product that, to a large extent, communicated the emotional impact it had on us when we experienced it. And, that was the main purpose in agreeing to the movie. And, I sort of knew from the start it wasn't going to be a docudrama. Hollywood doesn't do that. And anybody who really knows very much about the background of any true life story that gets made into a Hollywood movie knows that they very rarely stick strictly to the facts. It's just, Hollywood is full of creative people, and they like to be creative. So, but like I say, the net effect was good. It would be nice if certain things hadn't gone so far afield, but that's hindsight. Well, looking back on the experience, in a way, it was such a shocking and anomalous thing in my life that it just stands out as, in some ways, it seems like yesterday, because it just loomed so powerful in my life. But I just have to keep reminding myself from time to time just how much time has gone by, because, it's 34 years this fall, and wow, that's a long time. And yet, so much of my life has been determined by that one decision to get out of that truck. And I definitely, if I had it to do over again, would not get out of the truck. And that's not to say that I view the ensuing events as 100% negative. It's just that, even finding some positive things that came out of it all, that sort of knowledge, insight, and understanding was gained at a pretty dear price. So I'd rather it hadn't happened, actually. Well, it would be nice if somehow this could be turned into something that would have a really positive effect in promoting, understanding and, just betterment of humankind. I'm sure that's a goal everybody would want. When I'm talking about my experience, I try not to interpret or, project, my own surmising or anything like that, because, or if I do that, I try to label it as so, because so much of what happened to me is like a fragment of something it's just really too incomplete to me to draw conclusions about. And so, I think the fairest examination, is if I, leave it open to analysis later. Maybe with more information and more knowledge, I'll be able to draw more conclusions in the future. From the time I got out of the truck and left the crew, they were yelling at me to get away from there. It was a rather impulsive thing to do, and I was regretting it almost as quickly as I did it. And the things that they were saying and the feeling of impending danger, even some of the guys in the truck said that it just felt like something was about to happen, They just had that feeling of something impending, And I don't know, I guess I had that feeling too, and I really slowed down as I approached it and had a lot of misgivings about what I was doing. There was a kind of a weird feeling in the air, which may have been some sort of staticky electrical field or maybe magnetic or something. But at the same time, the sound was just extended off of both ranges, the high and the low of human hearing, to where the lows were something you really felt more than heard, and the highs were kind of like something that was like inside your head rather than coming through your ear. It was just such an intense sound, and with a wide range of frequencies there. But the men in the truck kind of felt a vibration that seemed to shake everything. And maybe that's what contributed to that feeling that something was about to explode or something was about to happen. And it may have been nothing more than just a buildup of electricity or some sort of charge of energy of some kind in this craft, that when I raised up and created, narrowed the gap between my body and it, that being the closest thing there, caused this discharge that injured or did whatever to me. Some people speculate that the reason I was kept so long was that maybe they were just, took that long to repair the damage, But I don't know. Some people think it was a deliberate shot and that they, did that for the purpose of taking me. But I really do think it was more being in the wrong place at the wrong time or doing the wrong thing at the wrong time by getting too close. Yeah, interest or at least obligation of some kind, If it was unplanned and it was just something that happened because of my unexpected approach, then that would explain it. But, how much planning or deliberateness it was on their part, I guess there's a part of me that just prefers to not think that there was anything, that I was set apart or chosen in any way, because, that might mean that it's not over or something. And I like to think that it's definitely 34 years in the past. Some people have speculated that there may have been some sort of time contraction perception on my part because I recalled such a short period of time. But then on the other hand, it might have been just that I was unconscious most of the time and became conscious either shortly after I was brought aboard or shortly after I was let off. Or somewhere in between, and that maybe, and then another possibility is there was conscious parts that I can't recall, during that 5 days. But that would be disconcerting if that were the case. I did have some pretty vivid dreams at one period, right after the the movie came out, and I was doing a lot of talking about it again after so long not, that it, was bringing a lot to the front of my mind, and maybe that's just what inspired these dreams. I had some extra vivid dreams that were different than my memories, but could have been just dreams. Oh. Probably the only euphoria I felt was that finally I'm out of there, at least that I can recall. There may have been other periods in the 5 days, if there was any other conscious period, where I had a different mood or different attitude towards it, but all I can remember is a lot of fear and relief when it was over. Well, a lot of people that have experiences of this sort, report, feeling like they're on a mission, or they, chosen for some important destiny, but, I haven't come to that conclusion. I do feel that I just do have an obligation to try to make it something that's as beneficial to my life and to the lives of those who hear about it as I can, but I wouldn't really call it a mission. It's just comes with the territory. I have a unique perspective that I need to share, and it only goes so far. When I woke up, I didn't come to very quickly. I was in and out for quite a lot of time. I was in a lot of pain, so it took me a while to kind of gather my thoughts and figure out where I was, which at first I thought was just a hospital. I remembered the incident in the woods eventually, but I thought, oh, maybe I'd just been hurt and they'd taken me to a hospital. And the sounds of movement around me, I just thought, well, that's the doctors. And when I finally got where I could focus my eyes and saw them, is when I just flipped out, because seeing these things was just a real shock, because I'd never seen anything like that, and at the same time I'm having all this pain and this feeling of suffocation, which just kind of gave me a panicky feeling to start with. So that explains a lot of why I reacted to what some people think is so badly. People say, "Oh, well, I would just remain calm and ask them this question and that question." But I guess everybody has their own approach to things. Maybe they'd be surprised at how they would react. But it was, the things I recall don't really make a tremendous amount of sense by themselves. I was looking for a way out and was eventually taken out by a person I took to be human. May have been, but I wasn't getting any answers. I thought this meant I'd finally, have some understanding of what was happening to me. But all they did was want to apparently get me unconscious as quickly as they could. There was a room in which there were points of light against a dark background. Now, I don't know whether this was like a planetarium where you're projecting points of light on a dark surface, or if this was some sort of a device of projecting a view of what was outside the craft at that moment. But I do know that when you moved the controls on the chair, it could cause the pattern to move. All the stars moved in unison. They didn't rearrange their pattern, but they moved, and that was really disorienting because it was all around. It was projected even on the floor, so I didn't want to do that again, and so I left that alone. But I don't know if I'd call that a star map, but it really seems like, why would anybody need that, to me? It seemed like if they were more technological, maybe it would just be nothing but a bunch of numbers. I don't know. It looked like a very direct sort of control of that craft. Just there a button, I'd press. And there was a screen there that there were black lines on it, long black lines that covered the entire screen from one end to the other with little segments on them. And they would change angle and sort of move, but there was no symbols, no reference. So why would this line need to slide up and slide like this if there's no symbol to designate where it is? But the button seemed to change that. So I don't know, maybe it was what was enclosed by that had meaning to them. But there was no symbols, no letters, numbers. Kind of a funny thing there, but I, kind of my better judgment was to stop messing with that. I could make things worse for myself. So it was with great relief that this human-looking individual came in and took me out of there. I ran up screaming, babbling all kinds of questions, but I, wasn't getting any response. It wasn't like it was just robotic or anything. It was a little bit of maybe wincing when I was yelling or something, and a sort of a faint smile, but very little reaction. But it was like more of a subdued or suppressed reaction as he took me out of there. It wasn't unkind or hostile, but it wasn't real encouraging as far as getting any information out of me. But I figured maybe he'll tell me when we get out of here. Take that helmet off, whatever. But the people who were dressed like him that he left me with weren't any more informative. They didn't answer anything. No sounds. It's almost like they didn't want to have the most minimum kind of interaction that they could with me. Because they were hiding something, or because I was in such a crazy state, I don't know. But that's the way it seemed to me. But I was just glad to find myself outside the craft and in more familiar surroundings. And, I wasn't regretting having not solved any mysteries or anything. I just wanted to be out of there and back home as quick as I could. Next thing I can recall after the experiences is waking up on the roadway outside of Heber and making my way into the town and trying to find a telephone that worked. And I went into these telephone booths and I went into the first one and picked up the phone and it was out of order, which kind of made me feel this surge of desperation. What if these phones don't work? But the next one did work. And the interesting thing is that nowhere on the mountain in any of those towns around there are there any more phone booths. But those phone booths are still there. They're kind of like been preserved all this time because the telephone operator listened in on the call and then knew for a fact that, the report came from there. This is an answer to the skeptic's charges that I was really at my mother's house in Snowflake or some other place. But, the sheriff found out from the phone company that that call was made from that phone booth at that time. So we have a row of phone booths there, and he were the only ones left on the mountain. Well, at that time, you didn't even have to have a coin to talk to the operator, and so you just pick it up and dial O, and you can talk to the operator. They can't do that now because they would be kept constantly busy with people taking advantage of that. But that's the way it was at the time. So I made a collect call to my family, and operator listened in, reported it to the sheriff, who sent a man right out there who got there right after my family did, picked me up and took me back to Snowflake. When I was returned, I didn't encounter my co-workers, any of them, for several days. My brother had become extremely concerned about my welfare because of the mob, the circus that was going on in town, the intrusions, and of course some of the phone calls were kind of sinister too. There were some warning calls about people that You know, there was a woman who was a nurse who said there was a elderly couple who had had an experience like this in a hospital where she worked, and when she went off shift, they were there, and when she came back, they were gone, and all records were gone too. And everybody was saying, "No, what are you talking about?" So, you know, they said she said just be aware of that. And then this other guy called. He said he was in the CIA, and again warned, don't let him, you know, just be handed off to the authorities. So my brother took that to heart and kind of kept me away from everybody for a while, for a few days, which, you know, naturally upset the sheriff, but it also kept me away from my coworkers, which had me doing a lot of reality testing. You know, these people are all saying I'm crazy and acting like I'm crazy. You know, I didn't have their corroboration like it would have been if we'd have said, yeah, you know, we went through this. It would have been a lot easier for me to you know, not do this reality testing and say, you know, do more coping with what happened than wondering whether it did or not. You know, every authority figure around me trying to tell me no, it didn't happen. You know, and everything in my mind told me it did. So when I finally did meet up with the rest of the crew later, it was very helpful. And you know, as time went on, you know, more of the outside evidence, independent evidence, came back to me. You know, a lot of it was kept away from me, things the sheriff was aware of, and things that went into his file that, you know, people who were in the area, hunters and campers and people who had seen things that he was aware of, he never told me about. So, as time went on, it got slowly better, but it's something, the trauma of which has just never completely left me, and you know, there's still a certain amount of coping to do, even to this day. And something has a tendency to cause my mind to want to go somewhere else, you know, once I've been on the subject, and I guess I've kind of reached that point with this interview, too. You know, people who have had similar experiences, or I recall having had such experiences, ask me, what should I do? You know, I really hesitate to advise them because, you know, on the one hand, it had been, you know, real cathartic to, you know, have this validated in some sense by researchers and people with similar experiences. But on the other hand, I've subjected myself to a lot of flack over the years that really been a heavy price that I've been aware of every single day, you know, working amongst people that, you know, there's always an undercurrent there. It helps that I can overcome it just by being me, just keep on being me, and then eventually they, you know, have to do a double take. They have all sorts of preconceptions that I'm finally able to shake them out of. But it's the fact that those prejudices exist before I even meet somebody that has been a continual obstacle in my life. But as time goes on, the more and more people who have an opportunity to know the real me can relate what they've learned to other people. You know, a lot of people were claiming to have been my best friend, or, you know, we were buddies in high school and all this stuff, and people I barely knew, so. And, you know, they're an authority on me and my character, you know, for the good or for the bad, either one. But, you know, they want to say they had close ties. Sometimes it's kind of funny. Mike Rogers was in a place one time, and this guy was bragging how he knew Mike Rogers and Travis Walton, knew all about him, and Mike was standing right there. Yeah, I know them guys, you know, they're like this and like that, you know. And Mike just kind of smiled to himself, didn't ever let the guy know that that was him. And I kind of take it that way too. You know, I've had people come up to me and say, you know, you look a lot like Travis Walton. And I get that all the time. Yeah, it's something I try to live a normal life, and you know, as far as the family is concerned, you know, I just don't let it dominate the topic all the time. it's not like it's some hush-hush or taboo thing, but, we just try to live our day-to-day lives without dwelling on the subject. Well, having gone through what I've gone through in my life, it gives me a kind of unique perspective at a dear price, but I think I've gained a lot of insight. It's sort of like being on the outside looking in some ways. I've gotten a lot of insight into people, human nature, and how our minds go through some real backflips when confronted with information or evidence that we don't want to accept the conclusion to which it's leading us. So I think we could all use a little more maturity in that area. That we're just willing to let the facts direct us to whatever is. I've gained a lot of insight about the so-called experts. That in many ways, there's some people who have a lot of inside information, but they're not necessarily the ones that are ostensibly in control. On the face of it, the people who we take to be our quote leaders are just really figureheads that are just riding the same wave we are. They're this train's barreling forward and there's nobody driving. But each of us have our own ability to sort of direct things if we quit adopting the attitude of let George take care of it. We all have a certain responsibility to try to shepherd the truth when we can and do our part. We might not be able to affect everything and everybody, but for our part, it's better to be part of the solution than part of the problem. And as I was discussing earlier, I've come to realize that in the field of ufology and this general topic, that there's a real unevenness in the quality of the investigative procedures being followed. And I think it would be very helpful if there were some sort of a guideline or set of guidelines that everyone agreed on would be the proper way to conduct an investigation or to evaluate a given case. And so, having gone through this directly, I think that I might even take that upon myself, not just to be the sole author of these, suggestions or guidelines, but maybe to, take the input from as many investigators as possible, and maybe correlate these into and digest those into a coherent whole, and then put that back out to these investigators for critique, and in the end, maybe get some consensus on the best way to, investigate and evaluate various cases as they come forward.